And I want to be able to bend this bar. Not only that, but I need to be able to bend this bar while keeping a character's hands on the bar. So in this case, for the hands, I'm just going to create a polygon cube right here. We'll use this as our example. So let's say we have a hand holding right there, and then another hand holding right here. So we need to bend this bar while keeping those hands on it as it bends. How do we do that? Now, there's another thing here, is that this bar, in my case, isn't one piece. We've got the bar in the middle, we've got the end pieces here, and then we have the plates on there. So not only do we have to bend the bar and keep the hands in place, we have to make sure that the rest of the bar moves with it right through here. This is a lot of stuff. This is a lot to keep track of. How do we do this? Well, first thing, let's just get the bar to bend. That's the most important one right here, this bar. So to do this, what you want to do is have the bar in place and then add enough detail so that you can get a smooth bend. So I just increased my subdivision height right here, or you could insert edge loops along the bar. You want enough detail so that it can bend. If it doesn't have enough detail, you're going to get these sharp bends and it's not going to look great. Now, with that said, you can always hit 3 on the keyboard, which will soften the object. So you don't have to have a ton of detail. You don't have to make it like super dense. There's a balance. We want low enough so that it's quick, but high enough that we can get a nice clean bend in here. So we've got that. We've got the detail in place. Let's add the actual bend. Now, I actually added that earlier, so let me delete it. Little preview. So we've got the bar here. Let's add the bend. Now, before you do any kind of deformation, an important thing to do is first make sure that you've zeroed out your transforms. So once you have the bar in place, go to Modify, Freeze Transformations. This makes sure that there's no random values in here. The other thing is it's a good idea to delete your history. So Edit, Delete by Type, History. In general, it's always a good idea to do these when you're rigging and modifying objects. Not all the time, most of the time. So we've got our bar here. Let's, looks like my pivot point got moved. I'm just going to center it there. That doesn't really matter, honestly. So let's add the bend. I'm going to select the geometry, and then I'm going to go under my animation menu set, deform, and we've got a lot of deformers here, but the one I want to look for is non-linear bend right here. And there's a lot of different deformers here you can use, but we're looking at the bend deformer right now. Now, if we open up the options, honestly, just keep them at their default. There's a lot of things in here, but we don't really have to worry too much about it. So I'm just going to hit create, and we get this line. Now, what this line does is it allows us to start bending an object. And you can see here, we've got a whole bunch of attributes, and the one we're most interested in is the curvature. This will allow us to change the bend here. Now, the problem here is that you can see that it's bending around the wrong way. It's bending side to side. We need to take this bend curve and rotate it. So I'm just going to rotate it 90 degrees here. Right there. So now it's essentially laying within the bar. Right there. Once I have that, I can just take my curvature and whoop, done. That's pretty much it. I can now bend my bar. Whoop, 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 wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Simple and easy. Now, with that, the actual bar is done. I can just take this and when I need to bend it, go into my curvature, bend it here. Now, there's a few issues with this. One, nothing's following it. The ends aren't moving. The hands that are supposed to be holding it aren't moving. That's not super helpful. The other thing is that to animate the curvature control, we have to select the bar and then open up the inputs here. That's not great. I'm not a fan of that. This is something I will tweak later, but it's something to keep in mind, because when you set keys, hit S to set a key, this won't get keyed by default here. So it gets very tricky to animate. So we need to fix those two things. So first off, let's get everything to follow along. Now there's a few different ways we can do this. The way I've set this up is I've got the two hands that are just separate. This would be like, imagine your IK hands on the object. And then I've got the ends here. Now the ends I've grouped together. So we've got the right group and left group. And within that group, we have the actual bar end here, and then the plate. And I actually have a second plate here, which we don't really need for now. Let's see, do it. Okay, cool. So we have the end and the plate all grouped together. Now for the group itself, I moved the pivot point to be at the end of the bar right here. So if we look at the bar, the pivot point of the group is right at the very end there. This is going to be important for certain things, but essentially it means that if I rotate this, it rotates from that end, which this doesn't look right like that. That looks terrible. But it just gives me a little extra control here. Okay, so that's the main setup. The ends are grouped together. Let's get the ends to follow along. Now, the way we're going to do this is I'm going to do it in two different ways. The first way is going to be for older versions of Maya. So if I want to have the whole end here follow the bar, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to constrain, and I'm going to use a point on poly constraint. This is a constraint that we don't usually use in animation that often. We tend to use parent constraints and all of these ones up here. Point on poly is a very useful constraint for constraining to a specific point on a character, or in this case, to the very end of this pole here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into wireframe mode, and I'm going to select a vertice. So right click on my bar, select vertex, and I'm going to select the very end vertice right here. Now I'm going to select the so this is the object that leads, this vertice. Now I select the object that follows, which is going to be the group right here. So I'm holding down control and then I click on the group in the outliner. From there, I'm going to do a point on poly. Always make sure to double check your options. Maintain offset turned on. That's good. Let's add that. You can see that this group now is constrained, and it is set to follow the UV. Or sorry, not the UV, the vertice. So now, if I take my bar here, I can just take my bend, curvature, whee, done. There you go. Follows along. And we can just get that. So this is the old way of doing it. It's still totally valid, but there is another way we can do it. And this is using a rivet in Maya. A rivet is similar, but it gives more options in different ways. So what a rivet does is, let's do this other side here. We can do the same thing. I'm going to select a vertice on this end here. But now I'm just going to add a rivet. Now a rivet, essentially what it does is it adds a point that we can use to constrain things. Instead of constraining directly to the vertice itself, if I select the vertice and add rivet, it creates a little locator right there. Right there, that is pinned to that vertice. You can see it moves right there. There's our locator. So it's essentially just adding an extra little piece that kind of gets riveted in, locked in there. And now we can select that to add any extra constraints and other elements in there. So it kind of seems like an extra step, but it gives you as an animator more control over how things can get set up, which is really cool. So now all I need to do is select my rivet here, which the nice thing with the rivet is you can also move it around and it should, where's my rivet? Right there. It should stay in line there. So you can adjust its positioning, which is really cool. It's like adding a locator to it. So we've got that right there. I can select my rivet, then select my group right here. And now I'm just going to add a parent constraint. Make sure maintain offset is turned on. Add that. It's pretty much the same thing. Now we get that. But we have the added benefit of being able to adjust the rivet and move that around instead of just locking directly to a vertice. So it just kind of removes the need of creating a whole locator hierarchy that we would normally have to do. It's very nice. And there we go. Just with that, we now have a bar that we can bend, and as they lift, we get that kind of, it starts to strain, and then as it bounces, we can boom, 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 bounce it around. There we go. Now, before we get to the hands, there is something else we have to be careful of. If I take this bar here and I move it up or down, you can see everything's following along. Great. Yay. But you'll notice that the bend line here stays behind. What this is going to do is, as I move the bar up and down, see how it stretches? We need that bend line to follow along with the bar. Now this is very simple. I'm just going to take my bend handle right here, and I'm going to parent it under the bar. So now it just follows the bar wherever the bar goes. So now I can bring it up, bend it, and whoop, there you go, done. So that's pretty much it. Now, in terms of getting the hands to follow along, it's just adding some rivets in here. So let's take this, and I want the hand to follow. Let's just add a rivet to all of these here. So I'm going to select all of these. You can add rivets all the way along. That's not good. Usually you want to do 1 point. So select, once again, let's select the vertice right here. Add a rivet, boop, right there. I can then move that rivet to the center of the object if I wanted to. Doesn't really matter. Let's do the same thing here. And this is why you want enough detail on the pole, on the bar, so that you can kind of get a rivet close to where the hand is going to be. Right where the vertice is. And then from there, we can just constrain the hands to the rivets. And rivets do slow things down. You don't want to add too many of them. And you want to be careful how you use them. If they slow things down too much, you can always use a point on poly constraint, which is still going to slow things down, but it'll give you a similar result. So select the rivet, then the box, parent it there. Now, as we go through, the hands follow along. There we go. Now, I did a straight constraint here. I wouldn't do that. I would add an extra locator so I have even more control. So on top of the rivet, I would add another locator between the hands. Just the way I've done all the other locator demos that I've done in the past. I want that hierarchy in there so that I can add more control in there. And there we go. Now the hands follow along. I can bend this bar and I get the nice polish in the hands there. And then I can just layer in some extra motion on my character. There we go. Now, with all of that, there is still kind of an issue. Now you want to, this, just a caveat here, you'll want to do this before you set up anything with the rig. So don't constrain the hands to the bar just yet. The main issue is that even though we've got all of this set up in place, the bend deformer is still a pain to get to. This is a nightmare for me personally. I hate having to animate things that are within the inputs here. It just takes more time, and more than likely I'm going to forget about it and then miss a key somewhere. So I want to be able to control that much more easily. To do this, I'm going to create a simple rig for the barbell. So I'm going to go to create NURBS primitive, and I'm going to create a circle. And I'm just going to use this as kind of a root control for my barbell. So create this, always make sure to name your objects. So this is going to be, get tablet to work here, barbell root. Okay. Once you have that in place, the next thing I'm going to do is, once it's all scaled and good, I'm going to go to modify, freeze transformations, and then edit, delete by type, history. Always a good thing to do. From there, I can take my barbell and I can either just parent it to the barbell root control. So now I can select that and everything moves along like so. I'm not a huge fan of that because, as you can see, when I select the root control here, everything turns green and looks highlighted. I'm never a fan of that personally. There's ways to turn that off in my default behavior, but for me personally, I will just constrain the barbell. So the barbell is all in one group all together here. I'll take that group and I'm going to constrain it to the root control. So select the root first, the thing that leads, then the thing that follows, constrain parent. Now, when I select the root control, I get the same thing, but now the barbell isn't highlighted in green. Then I can just take both the root control and the barbell group here, group those, and we'll just call this barbell. There we go. Cleans up the outliner right there. And I can also take these pin inputs. So these are the rivets. Add those to the group there as well, just to keep everything nice and clean. Voila. So with this, we've got a master control that we can use to animate our barbell. And we can add extra layers in there. So we have different pivot points, all of that good stuff. But what if, or let me put it this way, we still haven't fixed the main issue, which was the curve control is still hidden way down here. And that's kind of a pain. So how do we get that to work better? Well, what we can do is select the root control here, and I'm going to go to modify, add attribute. And I'm going to call this, let's just call it bend. And this is essentially going to add a new attribute in the channel box here. Now, the main thing is, what type of data are we going to have here? In this case, I want a float, I believe, which should be a typical value, just one value with decimal points and everything. A string will be text. Enumeration will be a list of things. Boolean is on and off. Integer is whole number, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, no decimal points. And vector is 3 points, so it'll be bend X, Y, and Z. Same thing as translate X, Y, and Z. We just want one number, so that's a float, just one value. So I created that. Good. Now, I want this control here, this bend attribute that I just added, to control the curvature right there. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go to Windows, General Editors, and I'm going to open up the Connection Editor. This allows us to connect different attributes together. So here on the left, I already have my barbell root selected because I had it selected. If it's not there, select the root control, hit reload left, load it on the left side here. Next, I'm going to find my bend control, so the bend handle right here, reload that on the right, and then I'm going to make sure that I'm outputting from the left side to the right side. You can see it in this button here. If I click on that, I can switch it, reverse that. In this case, I want to go from left to right. Honestly, it doesn't really make a difference. It's just however you load it in. So I want to go down here and I want to connect the bend attribute from the root control here. And then I want to connect it to the curvature control. So you just have to kind of look through here, find, let's see, curvature is under the shape node. So you'll notice it's not here. Dang it, where is it? If we look at the channel box, here's the bend handle. Look at where the curvature is. It's under the shape, or specifically under the input here. So to connect this, we just have to find this. If you're not seeing it in here, what we can do is double check the shape node. So in Maya, if you go to display, shapes, you can actually select the shape nodes underneath the objects in here and then find things in here. So here's curvature right there. So I can connect it, boop, right there. Another way you can do it, if you're not seeing the things you want, is you can connect things in the node editor, which we're not going to worry about too much right now. But right there, we've got that connected. So let me actually double check here. I just want to, out of curiosity, I want to see if the curvature is hidden in here. I don't think it is. Unless I missed it, which is totally likely. Okay. Yeah. So inputs. Okay. There we go. So this is actually another way you can select things. Just for the sake of demo. So let's say I'm just going to load the floor in here. I want to connect the root control bend right here to the bend attribute right here under the inputs, the curvature right there. Now, I try to find where this curvature is. Is it on the bar? Select that, reload right. No, can't see it there. Okay, is it on the bend handle? Load that. No, can't see it there. Where is it? Where do I find that attribute? Well, if ever you want to find an attribute here and see what it's selected to, right click on the attribute and just go to right here. And of course, I'm going blind. Select connection right there. And it's hidden behind my camera. So right click on something and then select connection right there. So I'm going to select that, right click on curvature, select connection, and then I'm going to reload the right side there. And now you can see it's actually selected that input node. And right here we have curvature. So once again, select the attribute you want to lead, then the attribute you want to connect it to, boop, right there, it's connected. Now I can just take my root control and there's my bend attribute right there. So now I don't have to go digging around inputs to find something. I can essentially just animate this whenever I need to bend it, boop, right there. If I hit S to set a key, it keys the bend right away. So I've created a very simple rig just by doing that. Now, another thing I can do is we don't need to see the bend line here anymore. So I can turn the visibility on that off. And there we go. We now have a bendy bar that we can animate and move around. And it's very simple, but it gets the job done. And voila. So that's the basics of getting a bendy bar. And you can use this for like a gymnast that has to go on like a... I always forget the name. It doesn't help that I'm super tired. But like jumping from bar to bar, you can add a curvature in there. You can play around with the bend controls. So you can actually switch it so that it bends only on one side versus another. So now if I take this, I'm just wiggling the one end like that. You can play around with the settings and get a lot of different tweaks and interesting changes in there. Let's see, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can show on this. Now, actually, one thing that's really cool is because of the way the bar is bending, the plates and all the other elements here are going to follow along and still be animatable very easily. So I can still spin this along its axis if I need to add like a spin, or if I need to add extra plates in here, if I duplicate this, it still follows the bend. So I can just add more weight here just by duplicating it, and everything stays together right there, which is really cool. So I can easily add or remove weight, and I'm done. Quick and easy. No problem. So yeah, that's pretty much the demo. So hopefully that helps someone. Hopefully it gives you some ideas on ways to make shots a little bit more interesting. And I would just play around with some of the deformers in Maya. You can find some really cool stuff, especially in the non-linear section here.